The soft glow of 32 candles illuminates the dark, overpriced gastropub. You can hear the collective inhale before the breath extinguishes the flames, followed by the predictable clapping of friends holding $16 craft cocktail. Marcus sits at the center of the heavy mahogany table. He forces a smile. He poses for the phone cameras, making sure his jawline looks sharp and his new titanium smartwatch is perfectly visible under the restaurant's ambient lighting. The photos will be uploaded instantly. The algorithm will validate his existence with digital hearts and comments from people he hasn't spoken to in a decade. From the outside, looking through the glossy filter of a glass screen, Marcus is winning the game. He is exactly where a 32-year-old man is supposed to be. But under the table, hidden from the flashes and the fake laughter, his phone vibrates violently against his thigh. He doesn't need to look at the screen to know what it is. It's the first of the month. It's the automated push notification from his banking app. The credit card statement has just generated, and the balance is a staggering reminder of his reality. While everyone around him is celebrating the passing of another chronological milestone, Marcus feels a cold, heavy knot twisting in his stomach. He makes $85,000 a year, yet the notification in his pocket is a quiet, brutal reminder that he is functionally bankrupt. If the corporate machine decides to terminate his position next Tuesday, this entire polished life he has built will evaporate into foreclosure and repossession in less than 60 days. Marcus is the poster child for the modern middle-class tragedy. He is premium broke. He drives a pristine 2024 crossover SUV that costs him $800 a month in payments and premium insurance. He lives in a luxury apartment complex with a resort-style pool that he is too exhausted to use because he works 50 hours a week just to afford the rent. He has successfully hit every single benchmark that society demands for his age bracket. But what nobody tells you about the modern American dream is that it has been meticulously engineered to be financed, not owned. Society measures maturity by the amount of liability you are willing to drag behind you. We have been completely brainwashed into believing that upgrading our cages is the exact same thing as escaping them. You don't buy the heavy steel vehicle to travel from point A to point B. You buy it to signal to the other drivers on the highway that you are not falling behind. You buy the expensive dinners to mask the quiet desperation of a life spent trading irreplaceable time for depreciating assets. Think about the invisible pressure of aging. At 25, you are expected to have the entry-level corporate badge and the first decent apartment with stainless steel appliances. At 30, the invisible timer goes off. The system demands that you present the engagement ring, the expensive destination wedding photos, the pristine driveway in a quiet suburb. Every single birthday stops being a celebration of your survival and becomes a brutal audit of your social status. You look around at your college friends. You see their newly constructed homes and their vacation posts in Europe. The panic sets in. You swipe the plastic. You sign the 72-month auto loan. You voluntarily shackle yourself to the desk because the fear of looking like a failure is much stronger than the desire to actually be free. The financial institutions do not look at your birthday as a personal milestone. They look at it as a highly predictable behavioral trigger. They know exactly the age when the lab rat feels most insecure about its place in the pack, and that is precisely the moment they slide the cheese into the maze wrapped in a high-interest, variable-rate loan. They prey on your biological clock. They monetize your anxiety about getting older. Age is nothing but a number, but in the modern economy, it is a countdown clock for your financial subjugation. The older you get without building actual invisible equity, the more desperate you become to buy the loud, plastic appearance of it. You end up renting your lifestyle from the bank, bleeding out cash and interest, just to convince strangers that you belong in the room. Marcus takes a sip of his overpriced drink. He looks at his friends laughing across the table. They are all wearing the same expensive clothes. They are all driving the same finance cars parked outside. He thinks he is the only one drowning. He thinks he is the only one carrying a secret mountain of consumer debt while wearing a tailored shirt. But what Marcus doesn't realize is the darkest joke of the entire system. He isn't the exception. He is the rule. The entire room is playing the exact same game of financial Russian roulette. And once you pull back the curtain on the benchmarking industry that keeps everyone paralyzed in this cycle, you realize the trap is far deeper than a monthly credit card bill. The greatest trick the financial sector ever pulled was convincing you that being average is the exact same thing as being safe. You look at your peer group to gauge your own survival. If everyone around you is bleeding out, you simply assume the bleeding is just a natural part of growing up. You sit in these restaurants. You scroll through the curated feeds. You feel the crushing weight of the invisible timeline ticking in your head. Level 1. The chronological debt trap. There is an entire ecosystem designed to tell you exactly what you should own by the time you reach a certain age. It's the benchmarking industry, the financial blogs, the lifestyle magazines, and the credit bureaus working in perfect harmony to dictate your consumption schedule. They publish the checklists, 10 things every successful 30-year-old must have. Notice how the list never includes unencumbered cash flow or peace of mind. The list always requires a transaction, the premium watch, the mortgage in the zip code with the good schools, the aesthetic living room furniture that looks great on camera but requires a 48-month installment plan. Society doesn't measure your success by your financial independence. It measures your success by your obedience to the consumption schedule. If you reach 35 and you aren't dragging a massive chain of liabilities behind you, the system doesn't view you as wise. It views you as defective. You become a glitch in their matrix because a human being who doesn't need to buy validation cannot be controlled by the threat of losing it. Now let's look at Marcus's friends at that table. Look at Dave sitting across from him, ordering the $100 Wagyu beef. Dave just closed on a $600,000 townhouse. Dave's credit score is an immaculate 800. To the untrained eye, Dave is the apex predator of the middle class. But what is a credit score, really? Your FICO score isn't a Medal of Honor. It's a compliance grade. It's the maze architect measuring exactly how much cheese the lab rat can gorge on without choking to death on the wheel. An 800 credit score simply proves you're highly efficient at moving money from your employer's bank account directly into the lender's vault, week after week, until you die. This is the invisible trap of the age bracket. You hit your late 20s and early 30s, and the exhaustion of the corporate grind sets in. You endure 50 hours a week of passive-aggressive emails, incompetent middle management, and a commute that drains your soul. So, when the weekend hits, you demand a reward. You call it retail therapy. You convince yourself you deserve the new golf clubs or the all-inclusive resort in Tulum. You don't deserve a resort. You deserve your time back. But you trade the actual key to your cell for a temporary dopamine spike that evaporates the moment your flight lands back home. You anesthetize the panic by looking at your peers. If Dave has a mortgage he can barely afford, and Sarah has a leased luxury sedan she cries over at the end of the month, then your own financial hemorrhage feels completely normal. You are trapped in the ultimate psychological prison. Level 2. The echo chamber of the broke. This chamber is completely soundproof. Logic can't enter. Math can't penetrate the walls. Inside this bubble, everyone collectively agrees to ignore the structural integrity of the bridge they're driving across. They validate each other's terrible decisions because acknowledging the truth would cause a collective psychological collapse. When someone in the group announces they just financed a $70,000 truck at 9% interest, the group doesn't hold an intervention. They buy him a drink. They applaud the upgrade to the cage. Shared delusion is the most powerful anesthetic in the modern economy. People would rather sprint off a cliff with their friends than walk alone toward salvation. We have created a culture where financial suicide is considered a rite of passage, as long as it looks good on a timeline. The true enemy here isn't just your lack of discipline. The enemy is the algorithm of the benchmarking industry, the lending institutions, and the data brokers. They track your age, your search history, and your milestones. They know when your college friends are getting married. They know when your high school rival buys a house. And they feed you targeted ads designed to trigger your deepest insecurities. They weaponize your own biological clock against you. They whisper in your ear that you're falling behind. They keep you focused on the glossy exterior. They keep you looking at the shiny paint on Dave's car and the square footage of his house. They want you focused on the appearance of wealth because the moment you stop looking at the objects and start looking at the actual numbers, the entire illusion shatters. The moment you strip away the financed metal and the mortgaged bricks, you expose the terrifying reality of what the modern 30-year-old actually owns. And when you look at the raw, unforgiving math, the moment you strip away the financed metal and the mortgaged bricks, you expose the terrifying reality of what the modern 30-year-old actually owns. And when you look at the raw, unforgiving math, the illusion doesn't just crack. It completely shatters. Let's dissect the ultimate middle-class lie, the concept of paper wealth. People love to calculate their financial standing by looking at the Zillow estimate of their home and the Kelley Blue Book value of their cars. They add up all these inflated, imaginary numbers, subtract the massive debt they can barely stomach, and convince themselves they are doing great for their age. But burn this into your brain. A house is only an asset if you can sell it without becoming homeless. Until the day you actually cash out and downgrade to something smaller, it is nothing but a highly demanding liability that requires constant maintenance, property taxes, and a 30-year interest bleed. You do not own the property. You are just the bank's most dedicated property manager who happens to pay them for the privilege of fixing their plumbing. Let's take Dave and his immaculate $600,000 townhouse. He puts 5% down. He finances the rest. On paper, his net worth might show 50 grand in equity. But let's look at the only math that actually dictates your survival in the real world. Liquid net worth. Liquid means cash. It means money you can access tomorrow morning if the corporate machine decides your role is no longer necessary. Dave has $3,000 in his checking account. His $70,000 truck has a $65,000 loan attached to it. If Dave loses his job on Friday, his paper wealth cannot buy groceries on Monday. He cannot slice off a piece of his kitchen granite countertop to pay the electric bill. His wealth is entirely trapped inside the cage, and this is where the chronological math gets terrifying. Level 3. The brutal liquidity equation. If you are in your 20s, your liquid net worth is probably close to zero or buried under the weight of student loans. That is statistically expected. But you possess the single most valuable currency on Earth, a massive time horizon for compound interest. The tragedy happens when you cross the threshold into your 30s. This is the exact moment the environment convinces you to trade your infinite time horizon for heavy, illiquid objects. The financial industry publishes articles stating that by age 35, you should have at least twice your annual salary saved. But they don't want you to actually have it in cash or liquid index funds. They want that value locked inside their lending apparatus. They want you highly leveraged. Let's do the exact math the lender intentionally hides in the fine print. You finance that $70,000 truck at 8% over 84 months. You aren't paying 70 grand. You are paying over $91,000 by the time the metal starts to rust. If you make $30 an hour after taxes, you just traded over 3,000 hours of your finite, unrecoverable life for an object that is mathematically guaranteed to become worthless. That is not a purchase. That is a voluntary prison sentence. When you finance the luxury lifestyle, you are mathematically shorting your own futures. Let's say you take home $5,000 a month. Between the massive mortgage, the two vehicle payments, the premium insurance, and the minimum payments on the credit cards you use to furnish the illusion, your fixed costs eat up $4,200. You are left with $800. $800 to feed yourself, fuel your vehicles, and pretend you have free will. You are one unexpected medical bill, one transmission failure, or one corporate layoff away from total systemic collapse. The lab rat looks at the size of the cheese and feels incredibly successful, completely ignoring the tension of the spring mechanism underneath it. The bigger the house, the heavier the trap. The nicer the car, the faster the wheel has to spin just to keep the repo man out of your driveway. You are told to measure your success by comparing your belongings to the people you graduated with. But here is a cold, cynical truth about human behavior. We only show the world our liabilities. We parade our debt on social media because debt can be worn, driven, and photographed. True liquidity, the quiet, unassuming pile of cash and index funds, is entirely invisible. So you keep running. You hit age 40, and the math becomes suffocating. At 40, your biological energy starts to dip, but the debt obligations are at their absolute peak. Your children need things. The house needs a new roof. You look at your paycheck, and before the money even hits your account, 80% of it is already legally claimed by institutions you have bound yourself to. You sold the best years of your life to rent a lifestyle you barely have time to enjoy, just to impress people who are quietly drowning in the exact same ocean. And as the realization sets in, as the cold sweat hits you at 3 a.m. while the rest of the overpriced suburb sleeps, you finally understand the gravity of the math. You didn't just spend your money, you spent your future. And the only way out requires a psychological shift so severe that most people would rather stay asleep than face it. You finally realize that the timeline society handed you is nothing but a blueprint for financial slaughter. The only way to stop the bleeding is to completely sever your relationship with the calendar. Level 4. The Ghost Protocol Economy. To escape the timeline, you must embrace the one thing the modern consumer fears more than physical pain. You must embrace absolute visual stagnation. You have to become completely comfortable looking like you haven't leveled up in 10 years. When the benchmarking industry tells you it is time to upgrade your lifestyle because you just turned 35, you have to look them dead in the eye and do absolutely nothing. When your old college roommate posts a picture of his new luxury SUV on social media, you don't compete. You look at your faded, incredibly reliable sedan with 120,000 miles on the dashboard, and you smile. Because you know a secret. You know that his brand new leather seats are chained to an $800 monthly anchor, while your 10-year-old fabric seats are completely unencumbered. His vehicle is a mobile prison cell. Yours is an escape pod. A man's true wealth is measured precisely by the amount of social irrelevance he is willing to tolerate. The maze is built entirely on visibility. The cheese only works if the other lab rats can see you eating it. The lending institutions rely on your burning desire to be noticed. But the moment you decide to operate in the dark, the trap loses all its mechanical power over you. This is the art of stealth wealth. It isn't about hiding millions in offshore accounts or wearing ridiculously expensive, quiet luxury brands. It is about hoarding your time and liquidity behind a completely unremarkable facade. You stop attending the extravagant destination weddings that cost you $3,000 just to watch someone else validate their fragile ego. You stop buying the premium titanium smartwatch to measure your heart rate, because your heart rate is perfectly fine when you aren't perpetually terrified of missing a mortgage payment. You take that massive, suffocating overhead and you slash it with a machete. You downsize the house. You sell the heavy metal. You trade the luxury zip code for a quiet, boring neighborhood where nobody cares what you do for a living. You stop renting your validation from strangers, and you start buying your oxygen back. Picture a random Wednesday afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. While Dave is sitting in a fluorescent-lit conference room, sweating through his tailored shirt because upper management is threatening corporate layoffs, you are standing in the middle of a massive hardware store. You're wearing a washed-out, blank gray t-shirt and a pair of scuffed boots. You are slowly comparing the grain on 2 pieces of cedar wood for a backyard project. Your phone is on airplane mode. No notifications, no frantic emails, no banking alerts warning you about an overdrawn account. You look completely ordinary to the cashier. You look like a guy who is barely scraping by. But underneath that blank t-shirt is a fortress of liquid cash flow, dividend-paying index funds, and zero consumer debt. If the macroeconomic environment collapses tomorrow, you don't panic. You just wait for the dust to settle and buy the dip. That is what real, untouchable leverage actually looks like. It doesn't look like a velvet rope at an exclusive nightclub. It looks like absolute, unbothered silence on a Wednesday afternoon. Freedom is not the ability to buy whatever you want to impress the crowd. Freedom is the absolute absence of the desire to prove you can buy it in the first place. So where do you actually stand financially for your age? If you measure it by the timeline of the echo chamber, you are probably exactly where the system wants you, heavily leveraged, highly stressed, and utterly dependent on the next direct deposit just to keep the illusion from shattering. But the moment you step outside their matrix, your age becomes completely irrelevant. The ticking clock immediately stops. You are no longer 32 or 40 or 50. You are simply a ghost in the machine, quietly accumulating the only asset that actually matters in this world, your own finite life. If you want to stay in the cage and keep playing the comparison game until your heart gives out, then close this video. Go swipe your plastic for another round of drinks you cannot afford. But if you are ready to break the lock, hit the subscribe button. Join the ones who are quietly building empires in the dark. And if you made it to the absolute end of this video, drop a comment saying, "Unfinanced cedar." The people trapped in the echo chamber will be completely confused, but will know you are awake. My name is Daniel Rath, and I'll see you outside the maze.